The room was filled with an air of disappointment. The judges leaned back in their chairs, pens resting on papers, their faces heavy with boredom and a sense of frustration. Contest after contest had passed, and none of the performers seemed to leave a mark. Some were talented in their own ways, but none had that spark that made a performance unforgettable. The audience was restless too, shifting in their seats, exchanging quiet whispers about how uninspiring the day had been. The stage, bright and inviting, seemed to mock everyone who had stepped onto it. It was as if the energy of the room had drained away, leaving behind only a sense of hopelessness. The judges were known for their strict standards. They had seen thousands of performances over the years, some extraordinary and some completely forgettable. Today, however, nothing had impressed them. Each time a contestant finished, a polite clap echoed through the hall, but it was forced, lacking genuine excitement. One judge sighed and rubbed their temples, trying to shake off the dullness of the morning. Another tapped a pen against the desk, scrolling through notes, searching for something, anything, that might bring a spark back into their eyes. They had come to the event expecting brilliance, expecting to be amazed, and so far, all they had found was mediocrity. Behind the curtains, there was a quiet hum of nervous energy. Some of the contestants were trying to psych themselves up, taking deep breaths and rehearsing lines in their heads. Others simply looked worried, their dreams feeling heavier than ever as they waited for their turn. The backstage area was a mixture of excitement and tension, a place where hope and anxiety intertwined. Volunteers moved quickly, helping performers with costumes, checking instruments, and making sure everyone knew when it was their moment to step into the light. But even the staff could feel the mood of the judges. It was heavy and difficult to lift. Among the crowd, whispers spread about the lack of impressive talent. Some spectators had come with high expectations, dreaming of seeing someone extraordinary, and they were now quietly disappointed. There were nods of agreement when someone muttered, "No one is really standing out today." A few brave souls still clapped politely at each performance, trying to keep the energy alive, but the overall mood was one of disinterest and low anticipation. The air seemed thick with doubt, and even the bright lights of the stage could not illuminate the sense of despair that hung over the room. Suddenly, a small voice from the side of the stage whispered nervously, introducing a new performer. This was different. The announcement barely drew a reaction, the judges barely glancing up, their minds still caught in the monotony of previous acts. The audience shifted slightly, unsure of what to expect. The person being introduced was only 8 years old, barely more than a child, and many in the room assumed it would be another minor performance that would quickly be forgotten. Some parents in the audience smiled gently, encouraging their own children to watch, hoping this young contestant might simply bring a touch of charm, even if it wasn't groundbreaking. The child appeared on stage, holding their head high despite the obvious nervousness in their small frame. They were dressed simply, nothing flashy or over the top, just clean and neat. Their eyes were wide, taking in the room full of strangers, cameras, and the critical gaze of the judges. The audience watched quietly, unsure if they should cheer or wait. For a moment, time seemed to slow, and the contrast between the child's size and the grandeur of the stage made the silence almost tangible. It was a moment of pure curiosity, the kind that makes people lean forward slightly in their seats, wondering quietly if anything surprising might happen. Back at the judges' table, skepticism was visible. One judge leaned forward, elbows on the table, chin resting in hands, clearly thinking about how little they expected from this performance. Another tilted their head, half smiling, half questioning the decision to allow such a young performer. Their notes were filled with marks for potential, but their faces showed disbelief. They had seen many talented adults struggle, and now a child was about to try. The thought alone seemed almost impossible to imagine as a moment of excellence. The child took a deep breath, closing their eyes for just a second, gathering courage. Then, slowly, they opened their eyes and looked directly at the judges, then at the audience. There was a quiet confidence there, almost invisible, but it was enough to make some people sit up straighter. A hush fell over the room, not out of respect but out of curiosity. Nobody knew what would happen next. The child placed their hands gently on the instrument, or in some cases, stepped to the center of the stage ready to speak or perform. Their small movements were precise, careful, and yet natural. There was an authenticity in their posture, something that immediately set them apart from the previous performers who seemed to be trying too hard. As the child prepared to begin, some parents in the audience whispered words of encouragement to their own children, hoping that bravery could be contagious. Others simply held their breath, waiting. The judges leaned slightly forward, perhaps unconsciously sensing that this performance might be different. There was no overt reaction yet, just a subtle shift, a faint stirring of attention. The room, still heavy with doubt, seemed to sense that something might change, though nobody could say for sure what that would be. Then the first notes were played or the first words spoken, and it was immediately clear that this was not going to be ordinary. The sound filled the room, pure and clear, commanding attention in a way that nothing had all day. The audience, at first hesitant, began to react. Tiny smiles spreading, heads turning, eyes widening. The judges, too, looked up, pens pausing mid-note, eyes locked on the child with disbelief slowly creeping in. The performance had a quality that was unexpected. A mixture of skill, emotion, and natural talent that could not be faked or rehearsed in the ordinary way. The child seemed completely absorbed in what they were doing, not aware of the critical eyes on them, and that sincerity made everything more powerful. As the performance continued, the energy in the room began to shift. The previous boredom and disappointment were slowly replaced with fascination and anticipation. Whispers turned into soft murmurs of amazement. Some audience members leaned forward, unable to tear their eyes away. The judges' expressions began to change, skepticism giving way to surprise, and then to admiration. There was a quiet acknowledgement, almost imperceptible, that this child might be something truly special. The tension that had filled the room earlier was replaced with a sense of possibility, a fragile hope that perhaps, at last, the competition had found a performer worthy of applause. Even the backstage staff paused for a moment, watching from the side as the child moved through their performance with a grace and confidence that was astonishing for someone so young. There was no showiness, no attempt to impress artificially. Just pure, heartfelt talent expressed naturally. Volunteers whispered to each other, nodding in awe, recognizing that this was something that would be remembered. The atmosphere, heavy and dull just minutes ago, was now electric, charged with anticipation and wonder. By the time the performance reached its first meaningful pause, the audience was completely engaged. Hands clapped quietly at first, then louder, more enthusiastic, until it was clear that something remarkable was happening. The judges sat up straight, their pens forgotten, their eyes locked on the child in disbelief and admiration. Even those who had been skeptical from the beginning could not deny the talent before them. For the first time that day, hope had returned to the room, fragile but undeniable. The child, unaware of the impact they were making beyond the stage, simply continued, lost in the joy and passion of performing. As part one of the story closes, the mood of the event has transformed. What began as a day full of disappointment, with judges ready to give up hope, has turned into a space of potential and amazement. The 8-year-old has captured the attention of everyone present, not through theatrics or gimmicks, but through genuine talent and heartfelt expression. The audience waits eagerly to see what will come next, the judges silently acknowledging that the day has just become far more interesting than anyone could have imagined. The story of this young performer is only beginning, but even now, it is clear that something extraordinary has stepped onto the stage. The audience was quiet now, fully focused on the small figure in front of them. Every movement the child made seemed to pull the room together, and even the judges who had almost given up hope could not look away. The 8-year-old moved carefully, as if each step and gesture was planned but also guided by instinct. There was a calmness in the way the child carried themselves, a balance of nervousness and determination that made watching feel special. Everyone could sense that this performance was unlike anything that had been on stage so far. Backstage, the atmosphere had changed too. Other contestants, who had been preparing for their moment in a haze of nerves and doubt, were now peeking through curtains. Their eyes widened at what they saw. Some whispered quietly to one another, "How can someone so young be so good?" There was a mix of awe and inspiration among them. The tension they had felt before started to dissolve into excitement, and a few of the older contestants even smiled, realizing that talent can appear at any age. Volunteers paused in their work, holding cords or adjusting lights, just to watch a few seconds of the performance. The energy that had been absent earlier was now in full force. The judges' skepticism was fading fast. One judge, who had been tapping their pen impatiently, now had a steady hand and an intense gaze fixed on the child. Another leaned forward slightly, their eyes wide with surprise. They were trying to process what they were seeing and hearing. It was not only skill that impressed them but the presence and confidence of someone so young. They exchanged quiet glances with each other, silently acknowledging that this performance was turning into something extraordinary. The notes in front of them felt suddenly insufficient to capture the magnitude of what they were witnessing. As the child continued, there was a subtle storytelling in every movement. The way the fingers pressed the keys, strummed the strings, or held a microphone carried emotion that filled the room. The notes weren't just notes. They had feeling, a story behind them that even those who didn't understand music fully could sense. The rhythm, timing, and flow were natural, and it was clear that the child had spent hours, maybe years, practicing, yet the performance did not feel forced or rehearsed. Instead, it felt alive, genuine, and connected to something bigger than the stage itself. Audience members shifted in their seats, leaning forward with growing anticipation. People whispered to neighbors, sharing their astonishment. Some had tears forming in the corners of their eyes, touched by the unexpected talent and the innocence of the performer. There were smiles of pure joy and nods of respect as they realized that age did not define ability. Even those who came for entertainment alone were now silently rooting for the child, eager to see how the performance would continue. The room that had been quiet with boredom was now buzzing quietly, filled with awe and admiration. The child paused briefly, taking a deep breath. This moment, small as it was, held the attention of everyone in the room. Even the cameras capturing the event seemed to hold their focus, highlighting how significant this performance had become. That pause allowed the judges to absorb what they had just witnessed. Their initial doubts were replaced with wonder. Each judge tried to make mental notes, but they were mostly lost in the realization that something incredible was unfolding before them. The skepticism that had clouded their thoughts was replaced by curiosity and a strong desire to understand the story behind this young talent. The child's eyes moved from the audience to the judges, a silent connection forming without words. It was as if the performer understood the weight of the moment, not with fear, but with quiet respect. Each gesture, each note, each breath was deliberate yet effortless. There was no hint of pretending or exaggeration, no attempt to be more than what was genuine. The authenticity was what made the performance so captivating. The audience sensed it, the judges sensed it, and even those working behind the scenes felt it. For a brief time, the stage became a place of magic, where reality was suspended, and everyone could be part of the story being told without even speaking. The performance shifted slightly, bringing a new energy. The child's skills seemed to grow with each movement, and what started as a display of talent turned into a demonstration of understanding and emotion. It was evident that this was not just practice, not just preparation, it was passion made visible. The audience responded naturally, some clapping softly in rhythm, others holding their hands over their mouths in awe. Even the judges, who were used to critical evaluation, began to smile subtly, their expressions softening. There was no need for harsh critique here. The performance spoke louder than any judgment could. People started to notice the small details that made the performance extraordinary. The way the child's fingers moved effortlessly, the way emotions played across their face, the way timing and rhythm seemed instinctive. It all added to the sense of wonder. Some audience members exchanged glances, unable to find words to describe what they were experiencing. The volunteers backstage continued to watch, inspired in their own quiet ways. This was more than talent. It was a reminder of the possibilities that exist when passion meets dedication, regardless of age. At one point, a subtle change in the performance captured everyone's attention. The child introduced a small improvisation, something that was not rehearsed but felt completely natural. It demonstrated confidence, creativity, and a deep understanding of what was happening in the moment. The audience held their breath, the judges leaned in, and even the child seemed aware that this was a turning point. That improvisation made the performance feel alive, not just practiced. It became clear that this young performer could take control of the moment and shape it, creating something that was unique and unforgettable. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, the audience was fully engaged. Every eye followed the child's movements. Every ear listened with attention. The room was electric with emotion. People who had been skeptical moments ago were now completely absorbed. Some were whispering to neighbors, sharing expressions of disbelief, while others simply sat in silence, soaking in the performance. The judges' pens had been forgotten. Their focus was entirely on witnessing the unfolding brilliance. Their earlier thoughts of disappointment seemed almost like a distant memory. This was a performance that could not be measured simply by notes or technical skill. It needed to be experienced, felt, and appreciated as a whole. When the final note faded or the last movement was complete, there was a brief silence. It was a pause that allowed everyone to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, the room erupted. Applause filled the space, some clapping loudly, others stomping feet, all cheering and expressing joy and admiration. The judges exchanged glances, a mix of astonishment and pride in their eyes. Even those who had been the most critical before could not help but smile and nod. The small performer had achieved something extraordinary, leaving everyone in awe. It was not just the talent that impressed, but the courage, the authenticity, and the passion that shone through in every part of the performance. As the audience continued to cheer, the child's face showed a mix of relief and happiness. The small body that had been nervous moments ago now radiated confidence and joy. The performance had been a success, not because of showiness, but because it came from the heart. The judges leaned back in their chairs, scribbling quick notes that barely captured the wonder they had just witnessed. Behind the scenes, other contestants felt inspired and energized, realizing that true talent can appear anywhere, at any age, and in the most unexpected forms. The story of this 8-year-old was becoming unforgettable. The initial disappointment that had filled the room had vanished, replaced with hope, amazement, and the knowledge that sometimes, the most extraordinary moments come from the most unexpected sources. Everyone present understood that this performance would be remembered long after the day ended. It was a reminder that talent is not always visible at first glance, that determination and passion can shine brighter than experience, and that hope can return even in moments when it seems lost. Part 2 ends here with the audience captivated, the judges impressed, and the small performer leaving an indelible mark on everyone's hearts and minds as the applause continued to echo through the room. The child stood for a moment, taking it all in. There was a mix of awe, joy, and relief on the small face, emotions that could only be understood by someone who had worked tirelessly for a dream. The audience had been won over, and even the most skeptical judges were now fully aware that they were witnessing something remarkable. The energy of the room had completely changed from a dull, bored atmosphere to one of excitement and wonder. People leaned forward, whispering to neighbors, trying to comprehend how someone so young could command such attention and skill. The child's eyes wandered briefly across the audience, landing on parents, friends, and even strangers who were cheering, clapping, and smiling. It was a quiet moment of connection, a recognition that everyone in the room was sharing this unique experience together. For an 8-year-old, the weight of the moment could have been overwhelming, yet there was a calmness and confidence that radiated naturally. The child had been nervous before stepping on stage, but now the fear had transformed into a quiet pride, an understanding that the performance had truly touched people. Backstage, other contestants were still watching, wide-eyed and silent. Some had been practicing for months, some for years, yet this young performer had managed to command attention in a way that few adults ever could. A few older contestants whispered among themselves, feeling both inspired and challenged. They realized that talent was not always about age or experience. Sometimes it was about passion, authenticity, and dedication. Volunteers paused their tasks, quietly observing, knowing they had just witnessed a rare moment of brilliance. The judges were still adjusting to what they had seen. One leaned back, shaking their head slightly, as if trying to clear their mind and fully process the performance. Another tapped a pen against their notebook, but not in frustration this time, rather in disbelief and admiration. They had underestimated the child initially, but the performance had proven them wrong. Every note, every movement, every gesture had been precise, filled with feeling, and impossible to ignore. Their faces, once clouded with skepticism, now reflected a mixture of amazement and respect. The child began to move through the next part of the performance, showing a subtle change in energy. There was a rhythm now, a flow that made the audience feel as if they were part of a story being told. Each movement, whether small or grand, carried meaning. The audience noticed, the judges noticed, and even the crew backstage noticed. The performance was no longer just about skill. It had become about storytelling. The child's presence on stage was magnetic, holding the attention of everyone, from the first row to the very back of the hall. It was clear that this performance was leaving a lasting impression. As the music or performance continued, the child added moments of creativity that were unexpected yet seamless. Improvisation blended naturally with rehearsed elements, showing not just skill but understanding and intuition. Every note, every gesture felt intentional and expressive, drawing the audience deeper into the experience. The judges scribbled notes furiously, trying to capture their thoughts, but even they knew that words could not fully describe what was happening. The moment was beyond critique. It was about witnessing something extraordinary in real time. Audience members were visibly moved. Some leaned forward, completely absorbed, while others had tears welling in their eyes. Parents smiled, children watched in awe, and strangers exchanged glances of shared amazement. The room, once heavy with doubt, was now full of hope and inspiration. People who had come expecting ordinary performances had been given something rare, something that made them remember why they loved moments like this. The child had managed to bring the room together in admiration and emotion, creating a shared experience that would linger long after the applause faded. The child paused briefly, taking a deep breath, a subtle reminder that they were still young, still learning, still growing. Yet even in that pause, the presence was undeniable. The judges exchanged glances again, now with unspoken acknowledgement that they were witnessing a talent that would be hard to match. The applause continued softly, slowly building as the audience processed the performance. It was not loud or boisterous yet, but there was a collective understanding that what they had seen was rare and valuable. Behind the scenes, parents and family members of other contestants were watching with a mix of admiration and humility. They recognized the dedication and courage it took for an 8-year-old to step onto such a big stage. Many felt inspired to encourage their own children, realizing that talent and confidence can emerge at any age. The volunteers, who had seen countless performances, whispered quietly among themselves, acknowledging that they had just seen a performance that would be remembered for years. Even in the midst of a busy, structured event, this child had created a moment that transcended the usual routine. The child continued, adding subtle nuances that made the performance feel alive and dynamic. Every note, every gesture, seemed to communicate emotion directly to the audience. The story being told through movement and sound resonated, connecting with people on a level beyond the ordinary. The judges, who had been trained to critique and evaluate, were now fully engaged, leaning forward, captivated by the natural expression and talent. Their pens were still moving, but the words written could barely capture the awe and surprise they felt. This was not a performance to judge. It was a performance to witness, to experience, and to remember. Small details added to the impact. The way the child's hands moved, the slight shifts in posture, the expressions on their face, all combined to create a performance that was genuine and heartfelt. It was evident that the child was fully immersed, not thinking about impressing anyone, but simply expressing what they had practiced and loved. This authenticity resonated with the audience, who could feel the sincerity and dedication behind every motion. The judges, too, seemed affected, recognizing that this was the kind of talent that goes beyond skill. It touches people emotionally. As the performance neared its climax, the energy in the room built naturally. The audience was fully engaged, and the judges were completely focused. There was no room for distraction, no time for doubt. Every eye followed the child's movements. Every ear listened intently to the notes and sounds that filled the hall. The atmosphere was electric, charged with emotion, admiration, and hope. The child's small presence had managed to captivate everyone, drawing them into a story that was both simple and profound. The realization was clear. This was not just another performance. This was a defining moment. Finally, the child reached the final part of the performance. There was a sense of culmination, a feeling that the audience was part of something special. The small improvisation added earlier returned, now more confident, more expressive. The room held its breath for the last note, the final gesture, waiting to see how the story would conclude. And when it did, there was a collective release. A wave of applause, cheering, and standing ovation that filled the hall. The child smiled, small and humble, yet proud, knowing they had done their best and that it had mattered. The judges, once doubtful and disheartened, were now fully attentive and amazed. They leaned back, exchanged quiet comments of astonishment, and scribbled down notes that tried to capture the experience but could never fully do it justice. The audience, too, was buzzing with excitement, sharing whispers, smiles, and expressions of disbelief. The energy in the room had transformed completely, from disappointment to inspiration, from skepticism to admiration. It was a moment that would be remembered, not just for the talent displayed, but for the courage, authenticity, and heart of an 8-year-old who had walked onto the stage and captured everyone's attention. As part 3 closes, the child's story continues to unfold. The performance had reached its peak, yet the impact was just beginning. The audience had witnessed something rare. The judges had been humbled and amazed, and everyone present had felt the spark of hope and inspiration. It was a reminder that talent knows no age, that authenticity and dedication can move people, and that even in moments when hope seems lost, a single individual can change the atmosphere completely. This 8-year-old had not only performed, they had left a lasting impression that would stay with everyone long after the day ended. The room was alive with energy now, a stark contrast to the dull, lifeless atmosphere of earlier in the day. Every person in the audience seemed to be holding their breath, anticipating the next move of the young performer. The 8-year-old had transformed the mood of the entire hall. People who had been whispering complaints and sighing in disappointment were now leaning forward, eyes wide, smiles forming, caught in the magic of the performance. The judges, who had almost given up hope, sat upright, fully engaged, their earlier skepticism replaced by amazement and curiosity. They had seen talent before, but rarely with such depth, emotion, and authenticity. The child's performance had entered a new phase, one where subtlety met skill. Every movement, every note, every expression seemed perfectly timed, as if guided by intuition rather than conscious thought. The audience could feel the emotion behind the performance, an unspoken story that connected everyone in the room. Parents in the crowd glanced at each other with teary eyes, children stared in wonder, and even the staff behind the scenes paused, unable to tear their eyes away. It was more than just talent. It was presence, confidence, and a genuine love for what was being shared. Backstage, other contestants were still watching through the curtains, whispering quietly among themselves. Some were filled with awe, inspired by the courage and skill of someone so young. Others were reflecting on their own journey, realizing that talent and determination are not defined by age. Volunteers, who had seen hundreds of performances, exchanged glances, knowing that what they were witnessing was exceptional. It was rare to see someone not only perform skillfully but also captivate an audience so completely at such a young age. The child was doing more than entertaining. They were creating a moment that everyone present would remember. The judges were scribbling notes furiously, though the words they wrote could not fully capture the impact of the performance. One leaned back slightly, shaking their head in disbelief, while another scribbled a word or two before pausing to take in another moment. They whispered briefly among themselves, acknowledging silently that this young performer was extraordinary. Their pens moved, but their eyes never left the child on stage. They were learning, in real time, how talent and heart could combine in ways that defied expectations. What had started as a day of disappointment had now become a showcase of brilliance. The child's eyes scanned the room, connecting briefly with members of the audience and judges alike. There was a quiet confidence in those eyes, a calmness that contrasted with the young age and the immense stage. It was clear that the child was not performing for praise but for the love of performing, and that authenticity resonated with everyone present. The audience felt it, the judges felt it, and even those working behind the scenes felt the energy. The room had shifted from being a space of evaluation to being a space of shared emotion, a place where everyone was part of a story unfolding before their eyes. As the performance continued, the child's skills became even more apparent. Each gesture was precise, yet natural. Each note or movement seemed intentional, carrying with it a depth that could only come from years of passion and practice. The audience was captivated, some whispering in awe, others holding their hands over their mouths in disbelief. The volunteers backstage stopped to watch, realizing that they were witnessing something rare. The energy in the room had transformed completely. The earlier gloom had vanished, replaced by excitement, inspiration, and admiration. There was a subtle improvisation at this point, a small shift that drew even more attention. The child seemed to instinctively know how to heighten the impact of the performance, blending rehearsed elements with spontaneous creativity. It was a demonstration not only of talent but of understanding and intuition. The audience leaned forward, caught in the moment, unable to look away. The judges exchanged brief glances, silent acknowledgement passing between them. They knew that the child was not just performing. They were communicating, connecting, and telling a story that words could not capture. The room's atmosphere became electric. Each passing moment intensified the connection between the performer and the audience. Parents smiled proudly, some with tears in their eyes. Children sat in awe, inspired by what they were seeing. Audience members whispered among themselves, recognizing that they were witnessing something truly special. Volunteers and backstage staff were just as captivated, knowing that these moments do not happen often. The energy was contagious, spreading from the stage to every corner of the hall, and even the judges, trained to evaluate with critical eyes, were caught up in the magic. The child's performance entered its climax, building naturally, pulling the audience along. Each movement, each note carried weight, emotion, and intent. The room was fully absorbed, hanging on to every sound, every gesture. The judges' pens had stopped moving. Their focus was entirely on the child, their expressions a mix of astonishment and admiration. The energy in the hall was a testament to the power of authenticity and talent combined. For everyone present, it was more than a performance. It was a shared experience that was both inspiring and unforgettable. Audience members started clapping softly, as if testing the waters, then louder as they realized the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Cheers and applause grew, filling the hall with energy and excitement. The judges, who had been almost disheartened earlier, now nodded and smiled, clearly impressed by the courage, skill, and heart of the performer. The child's presence had changed the mood of the entire day, proving that even in moments of doubt, something remarkable could emerge. The final movements were executed with precision and grace. There was a sense of closure, a feeling that the story being told was reaching its natural end. The audience leaned forward, holding their breath for the last note or gesture. When it came, there was a collective exhale, a release of awe and appreciation. Applause erupted, louder than before, with many standing to show their admiration. The judges were clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling in disbelief. Volunteers and staff shared quiet moments of joy and astonishment, knowing that they had just been part of something extraordinary. The child stood on stage, small and humble, yet beaming with pride and relief. The performance had been successful, not because of flashiness or gimmicks, but because of the heart, dedication, and authenticity that had shone through. Every person in the room, from the front row to the back, had been touched in some way. The judges, once ready to give up hope, now felt a renewed sense of excitement and possibility. The performance had reminded everyone of the joy of witnessing talent, courage, and passion in its purest form. Backstage, other contestants were filled with admiration and inspiration. They realized that dedication, practice, and love for what you do can transcend age and expectations. Parents and family members watched, quietly emotional, recognizing the bravery it takes for a young child to step onto a stage and give their all. Volunteers, who had seen countless performances, whispered to each other about how rare it was to witness such a moment. The energy of the room had shifted completely, from disappointment to hope, from boredom to wonder, from skepticism to amazement. As Part 4 concludes, the impact of the performance was undeniable. The child had captivated the audience, impressed the judges, and inspired everyone who had witnessed the event. The room was filled with applause, excitement, and admiration, and the story of this young performer had begun to spread beyond the stage. It was a moment that would be remembered for years, a story of courage, talent, and authenticity that proved that hope can return in the most unexpected ways. The 8-year-old had not only performed, they had changed the atmosphere, restored excitement, and reminded everyone of the magic that can happen when passion meets opportunity. The applause continued to echo through the hall as the child stood on stage, a mixture of pride and humility in their eyes. The performance had ended, but the impact was far from over. The audience was still buzzing with excitement, exchanging glances and whispers of amazement. People were clapping, cheering, and some even had tears in their eyes. The judges, who had nearly given up hope earlier in the day, were now leaning forward, smiling, and applauding enthusiastically. They had seen something truly extraordinary, something that words could barely capture. The child took a small bow, eyes glancing at the judges, then the audience, soaking in the moment. There was no arrogance, no attempt to demand recognition, just quiet satisfaction in having shared their talent. The humility in the child's demeanor only added to the charm, showing that this performance was about love for the craft, not seeking approval. Parents in the crowd whispered to their own children, hoping to inspire them, pointing out how courage and dedication could shine even at a young age. Volunteers and staff behind the scenes clapped quietly, still in awe, feeling lucky to have witnessed such a performance. The judges finally began to speak, their voices filled with admiration and a sense of awe. One described the child as remarkably talented. Another added that this performance was more than skill. It was heart and courage combined. They spoke about the confidence, precision, and emotional depth displayed on stage. Their comments were genuine, and it was clear that their initial doubts had been completely erased. The room felt charged with positivity, a feeling of inspiration that seemed to linger in the air. Everyone present realized that they had witnessed a rare and memorable moment. News of the performance began to spread quickly. Cameras captured the moment, and audience members recorded videos to share with friends and family. Social media would later light up with clips of the young performer, and the story would quickly reach beyond the walls of the hall. But for those present at that moment, the experience was intimate, almost magical. Everyone felt connected to the child's courage and talent. The atmosphere was no longer about judging or evaluating. It had transformed into a celebration of achievement, dedication, and the possibilities that come from following one's passion. Backstage, the other contestants watched with wide eyes, inspired and moved by what they had just witnessed. Many were quietly discussing their own journeys, realizing that dedication and love for what you do can sometimes speak louder than experience. The child had shown that age is no barrier to excellence, and that authenticity and courage can command attention and respect. Some older contestants nodded in quiet admiration, appreciating the reminder that talent can be found in the most unexpected places. Volunteers and event staff shared knowing smiles, recognizing that moments like this are rare and precious. The child's family, watching from the sidelines, was overwhelmed with pride. They knew how hard the young performer had worked, how many hours were spent practicing, and how much courage it took to step onto such a large stage. The applause and recognition were a testament to years of dedication and love for the craft. Yet the child's reaction was modest, a reflection of the genuine joy that came from performing, not from seeking fame or accolades. This humility made the performance even more special, showing that true talent can shine quietly and still leave a lasting impression. As the day continued, the judges awarded recognition, but more importantly, they shared words of encouragement. They emphasized the importance of following passion, working hard, and remaining authentic. Their feedback, full of respect and admiration, served not just to acknowledge the child's talent, but to inspire others in the room. Parents, children, and fellow contestants listened closely, absorbing the wisdom behind the praise. The young performer, while still processing the experience, seemed to understand the significance of the moment and accepted the compliments with gentle gratitude. The child's story didn't end on the stage. Opportunities began to open up almost immediately. Invitations for performances, media attention, and chances to meet other talented individuals started to come. While the young performer was still focused on learning and growing, the recognition was a clear signal that effort, courage, and passion do not go unnoticed. Yet despite the attention, the child remained grounded, showing that humility and authenticity were as important as skill. This balance only enhanced the inspiration that others drew from the performance. People in the audience reflected on their own lives, feeling motivated by the courage and talent of someone so young. Teachers, parents, and children alike found themselves thinking about the ways they could nurture their own passions. Some were inspired to encourage children to pursue dreams with dedication and heart. Others, witnessing the unwavering focus of the performer, were reminded that persistence and practice are essential ingredients for success. The performance had sparked hope, excitement, and inspiration, leaving a mark far beyond the applause and immediate recognition. In the days following the event, conversations centered around the child's extraordinary performance. Media outlets highlighted the story, sharing videos and interviews. Social media platforms were filled with clips that showcased not just skill, but emotion, confidence, and presence. Teachers, parents, and mentors used the performance as an example of dedication and authenticity. Friends and family celebrated the young performer, but more importantly, they celebrated the message behind the performance. That talent, courage, and passion can shine, regardless of age. The judges reflected on the experience with renewed energy. They realized that they had underestimated the impact of genuine passion and talent, particularly when it came from unexpected places. Their initial disappointment and loss of hope had been completely reversed. The experience served as a reminder that greatness can appear at any time and that the smallest performers can sometimes leave the largest impression. They knew that this young performer had changed not only their perspective but also the energy of the room and the day itself. The child, though exhausted by the performance, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. There was satisfaction in knowing that their hard work and courage had touched so many people. They had stepped onto a stage with confidence and authenticity, sharing their passion with the world. And in doing so, they had inspired others to believe in themselves, to pursue their dreams, and to recognize that age or experience does not define the ability to make an impact. The child had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that the extraordinary can appear in the most unexpected forms. As the final moments of the event unfolded, people lingered, reluctant to leave, still discussing what they had witnessed. Conversations were filled with words like amazing, inspiring, and unforgettable. The applause continued, a collective celebration of talent, courage, and the human spirit. The judges offered final congratulations, acknowledging the remarkable impact the young performer had made. Parents and children alike left with a renewed sense of possibility and excitement, carrying the energy and inspiration of the performance into their own lives. In the end, the 8-year-old had done more than perform. They had transformed a room full of doubt and disappointment into a space of hope and admiration. They had reminded everyone that courage, talent, and authenticity can leave lasting impressions, no matter how small the performer might be. The story of that day would be remembered by everyone present, shared with others, and used as a symbol of what is possible when determination meets opportunity. The child had walked into a room full of skepticism and had left it full of inspiration, proving that true greatness often comes from unexpected places. The day concluded with a quiet sense of awe. People left talking excitedly, sharing what they had witnessed with friends, family, and colleagues. The judges returned to their work, but their minds were filled with the memory of a small performer who had reminded them of the power of hope and authenticity. Volunteers and staff carried the energy home with them, knowing they had seen something that would stay in their hearts for a long time. And the young performer, tired yet happy, had gained confidence, recognition, and the understanding that their love for what they did could touch the lives of many. The story of this 8-year-old was more than a performance. It was a real-life reminder that hope, courage, and talent can shine brightly, even in the most unexpected moments.